name is Mantho. I'm a local pediatrician. I'm from Darwin. I work at the Darwin Hospital. This talk is going to be the same as yesterday for those who were here yesterday, or those who heard me give the talk yesterday. It's going to be exactly the same. So if you perhaps want to go somewhere else and get more new information, that will be okay. I was asked to do it again because somebody that was on the program didn't turn up or withdrew or something. So please don't feel like I will get offended if you get up and go in the middle of the talk. So that's all good. Anyway, so as mentioned, I'm a pediatrician who has special interest in child development, particular interest in children who have experienced some form of abuse or neglect. So this talk is going to be very interactive. I expect us to all talk and share some ideas. I know I'm talking to experts, and I always learn from the carers that I work with, and I expect that today I will have something to learn from you as well. I will present 3 cases that we will read through. I'm sure you will identify with the cases that I'll put up, and then I'll go through my talk, and then at the end we will go back to the cases and have another discussion to see what you think about the cases. Alright, so case 1 is an 11-year-old boy. These are all my patients, by the way. An 11-year-old boy who's been in long-term foster care placement from the age of 3. He's got 3 older siblings, older girls. One of them is about to exit care. She's 18. They've all been in care for a long time. This boy, unfortunately, has had multiple placements. In the last 12 months that I have seen him, he's been in at least 8 homes. The department were in a crisis, and at that point that I saw him, he was in temporary placement, emergency accommodation. And the main reason for that is because he was very aggressive to not only his carers and the other children in the house. He was very aggressive to his case managers who would throw stones, rocks. But interestingly, school was actually quite happy with him. In fact, the other times that I saw him, his class teacher came to the appointment, which I thought was great. So that's him. And the second case is a 2-year-old girl who's been in stable care placement for 9 months, since the age of 9 months, due to concerns about alcohol abuse, severe neglect of all areas of neglect you can think about. When I saw her, she was doing really well. The only thing I thought about her was that her speech was a little bit delayed. But other than that, everything was going good. The carer was quite happy with how things were going. She was doing 2 days of daycare and interacting very well with kids in daycare. Now, the carer asked me a question that actually took me off guard, and she said to me, I don't really know if I should continue looking after this little person because my husband is going to be, transferred with work to another state. Husband was in the army. She wasn't sure when that was going to be, but she thought it might be in the next 12 to 24 months. And she felt that she was getting very attached to this little girl and didn't really want to, break that bond, break her heart and break the little girl's heart. And she felt that if she was in long-term placement, it would be better for her. So she said, what do I do? I said, I'm not sure. Anyway, so this is another interesting case, a bit of a different one. 11-year-old, 2 girls, 9 and 11. They've been in care for some time. Mum had difficulties with lots of other challenging adult things, alcohol, domestic violence, and so on and so forth. The mum had gone through a process of rehabilitation and was doing very well. She was off alcohol for some time, but because of the rough life she'd lived, she had some physical problems, physical ailments. She had a back problem and saw this and that, and wasn't very mobile and found things very difficult by herself. To get the kids organized to go to school, to get their lunches packed, to ensure homework was done, and all those just usual things that we take for granted when we are able to move around and do things yourself and get in the car and drive and go to Woolies and get stuff. So she wasn't able to do that. A lot of community organizations had been helping her to really get things going. But the girls were at an age where the 11-year-old was
starting to be a little bit independent, but not really. You know, she couldn't help mom get the house organized. So they came to see me because they had some terrible skin rashes and itch and allergy-like type things, which the case managers were worried that it may have been from an unkept house. So my focus today is going to be primarily on child neglect and how that impacts on the development of a child as a foundation to hopefully for you to understand why the children that you look after behave the way they do or have the problems that they do. So essentially, as you all know, neglect is essentially not meeting the child's basic needs, failure to provide physical health care, even just the basic supervision. Kids going to the park, you know, 2 and 3-year-old going to the park on their own, is that neglect? Yes, it is neglect. Nutrition, you know, inadequate nutrition. These girls were living on tin spaghetti for a long time because mom just wasn't able to do much more than give them a can opener to open the tin spaghetti. So if we have any case managers in the room, some of these pictures might not be so foreign to you. You might go to house inspections and come across environments that look like this, and with a child that actually lives in that kind of environment. And unfortunately for us as pediatricians, we just hear stories. We don't have the visual impact of what these children have lived through. And often we see them after they've had a nice bath and they don't smell because the carers have done all that lovely thing, and we look at them and think, this child is fine, what's the problem? But the case managers, heads off to you guys, and I understand why there's such a rapid turnover of case managers and support workers, because it's such a traumatic work for you. And tribute to you, like, hooray, you guys are amazing. But unfortunately, that's just how it is, and that's what other people's work has to be. Anyway, so just a little bit of boring data. The issue of neglect and abuse is massive. This is Australian data. These are substantiated cases of which emotional abuse, neglect formed the greater majority of the concerns reported. America doesn't do any better. In fact, neglect over there is substantiated more than all other cases of child maltreatment. This is an interesting slide. It's got a lot of things on it, but what I particularly want to focus on is that third column or second column, which, depending on which way you look at it, that's the severe neglect in the context of, in a family context, because that's usually where we come in as, yourselves as carers and case managers, where there is a persistent, ongoing deprivation on a child's part for the family or the immediate care environment to provide those things that they need to be fulfilled human beings. This is the type of neglect that causes problems with development of the brain. And then we see it as behavioral problems, speech delay, the child is 2 years old and they're not walking. We'll talk more about that. However, there is a form of neglect which is in that first column. I don't have a pointer. Do I have a pointer? No? Yes, this one. So this bit of this part of the column here is actually showing healthy neglect. We're not going to talk about that today, but just in passing, it is okay for you to teach your foster children to self-settle. I realize that some of you have babies that you take. I had a patient who was taken from home, or actually put in placement from the age of 6 days old. It is okay for you to allow your child to self-settle. They will not have any brain damage. That's what it's called. That's the intermittent diminished attention in an otherwise responsive environment. It enhances independence. It enhances confidence in the child that they can do it. I'm actually also a neonatologist, so I might get sidetracked to talk about newborn things. Maybe I'll just not talk about that now. So the severe neglect is the one that we are hoping to establish the problem that it causes to all children across the board. We're going to go through a little bit of science. It might be boring, but I have tried to make it as straightforward and hopefully plain as I could possibly do. And I mean, obviously all of us know that everything evolves around our brains. The medications that we do primarily act on the brain. You know, you have a little bit drink of wine. Where does it go? It makes you feel good because it goes to your brain. So everything starts and finishes in our brains. So that's where the impact of neglect will primarily be. So there is a concept called sculpting. It's a very interesting concept that I hope, if you take nothing else out of my talk, you will understand that very basic principle. When a baby is born at full term generally it's 40 weeks, sometimes 38 weeks for some women, that baby is born with a whole set of neurons or brain cells that they will ever have in their entire life. And then it's up to the baby's genetic abilities, the baby's environment, other things that might affect those neurons to determine how that human being is going to end up being. Yeah? So these neurons are just scattered bits and pieces of cells which are not connected. And the connectiveness of those cells or the sculpting of those cells is depending on a nurturing environment that the baby will be growing in. And we do know that the majority of the sculpting happens in a baby's life between the age from birth to about 5 years, which is where early intervention focuses on. However, WHO extends this, the concept of early intervention to challenge us as clinicians and service providers and politicians who decide how much money other people get, to extend that to 8 years. Because during this process, that sculpting phenomenon is more prevalent. When you miss the boat, when we miss to intervene, so we've got a child who's been exposed to traumatic and neglectful environments beyond that time, the repair that can be done is minimal. All right? So I hope you're thinking back to those questions that those cases that I put through. All right. Now, the sculpting, as I said, is very much based on the serve and return theory, which essentially means that when you do something or when you talk to somebody, you expect them to talk back to you. When I walk past you and I smile, I expect something. I expect some kind of response. It's a similar concept in when babies are born and as they're growing in that environment. That example there is saying to us, when a baby looks at you on their coo, they make little noises in their cot, and you open the door and natural response is to smile. I mean, you don't learn it from anywhere. You just do it because the baby's talking to you. You hear a lot of mums say, oh, this one is noisy, they cannot stop talking, referring to their 8-week-old baby. That's the language they use. So you reciprocate by smiling, you reciprocate by, making funny faces, the sort of stuff that we do. So this process is very much influenced by what the child's environment looks like. So a nurturing environment is one that will respond not only in giving the baby food, but also respond in visual cues, responding in touch, responding in many other ways that allows the baby to explore their environment in a safe way. One of those pictures that I put up, you saw a baby eating tin spaghetti and there was bits of cigarettes on the plate. So that's not the kind of environment. The mother's doing the right thing, they're giving them food, but it's not giving the baby food in a safe and encouraging environment. So those things are not helpful for the baby's individual neurons in the brain to get sculpted or get connected together and end up functioning in a more normal way. The second most important part is the biological aspect, which is actually a little bit unfair, that we don't know when this critical time is going to be. But we do know that even though you can have 24 hours of a nurturing environment, the sculpting is not going to happen during all of that time. There are some critical times that those specific parts in the brain get switched on. What that means is every child must live in a nurturing environment, regardless of, it shouldn't be intermittent. It shouldn't be just 2 hours in a day and then 8 hours or 12 hours of neglect. Lock you in your room, stay there by yourself, and then I open the door, give you food, you're fine. So it is critical that the environment that the child lives in at all times encourages these sculpting or the connectiveness of the brain to occur. This man, the Harvard University in America have done a lot of work on this concept of serve and return. This video is only just about 90 seconds, but it makes it just much nicer explanation that I can do in 15 hours. Hopefully it works. Yes, please.
The key to forming strong brain architecture is what's known as serve and return interaction with adults. In this developmental game, new neural connections form in the brain as young children instinctively serve through babbling, facial expressions, and gestures. And adults return the serve, responding in a very directed, meaningful way. It starts very early in life when a baby coos and the adult interacts and directs the baby's attention to a face or hand. This interaction forms the foundation of brain architecture upon which all future development will be built. It helps create neural connections between all the different areas of the brain, building the emotional and cognitive skills children need in life. For example, here's how it works for literacy and language skills. When the baby sees an object, the adult says its name. This makes connections in the baby's brain between particular sounds and their corresponding objects. Later, adults show young children that those objects and sounds can also be represented by marks on a page. With continued support from adults, children then learn how to decipher writing and eventually to write themselves. Each stage builds on what came before. Ensuring that children have adult caregivers who consistently engage in serve and return interaction, beginning in infancy, builds a foundation in the brain for all the learning, behavior, and health that follow.
Isn't that amazing? So you can see how if a child misses on those things at an early age,
Learning to deal with stress is
is it on now? So, this concept is so important to us as pediatricians because, we then end up with babies whose brains look like that. On that screen, you can see that a child who has lived in a nurturing environment, those little purple dots are reflecting sort of a pictorial depiction of the neurons, the cell nerve bundles. And those threads are joining the specific parts of the neuron to neuron connection, which then establishes the cognitive side of the function of the brain, the motor function of the brain, which is when the baby starts to sit up and starts to crawl and then walks up and is able to now walk up the stairs on their own. That fine motor skills. If those pathways are not linked and have missed that period of sculpting, you can expect that this child is going to have long-term problems. Yeah? That child is going to have long-term problems. And we know, even from research with MRIs of the brain, as you can see on that picture, that the architecture of the brain is not the same. That's why what you people do is absolutely important. You go through so much hardship. You open your hearts wide, your houses. You go through so much sacrifices for your own personal, individual families. But what you are actually doing is allowing that child's brain to sculpt. You're allowing those neurons to join together that hopefully, even if they leave your house at the age of 4, after you've been with them for 2 years, you can be confident that you have accomplished something for that child for the rest of their lives. Yeah? Now, the trouble with with kids, who experience adverse upbringing at a young age is because their whole body gets programmed to respond to stress and pain in a way that then later on impacts everything else about them. We know that stress in our bodies can be good, but most of the time these kids are exposed to unhealthy stress, which modulates or reprograms the way their immune system, for example, works, the way their neurological system, for example, works, the way the chemical balances in their brain are arranged. And what that means is you will have a child who in long term will be more prone to chronic diseases. We know that children who are exposed to substance abuse in utero are usually born small for age. We've got the Darwin Hospital. We have a lot of babies who are born with intrauterine growth restriction. And we know that long term these kids are more susceptible to developing things like diabetes. They're more susceptible to developing heart diseases at a young age, heart attacks at the age of 38. So it sets them up for quite bad things, which is why what you do is really important. So that's another picture to show, as opposed to demonstrate what impact neglect can have on a child's brain. That picture on your right shows a normal brain, and those black holes are essentially representing the fluid spaces in the brain. When the brain tissue doesn't grow, what happens to the brain is the fluid spaces get bigger and fill up the head or the skull. So you find that these babies have large ventricles, but the head and the brain size is very small. So when you take your child to the child health nurse, what you are interested in finding is that your child's weight is following the same line, the growth line. Other people have blue books in other states, yellow books, red books. In the Northern Territory, we have nothing. We have nothing. We did, you said what, yellow book or red book? Red book. Orange, yeah. They took it away, which was sad, isn't it? Because that book had immunizations on one page and it had the growth charts. You can actually track to see how the baby's health is going. So when you have that little book, please always have a look at what the head size is doing, all right? What you want the head size to do is grow on the same line. It doesn't matter if it's on the third line, which is the bottom one, or it's on the 90th line, 97th line, which is the top one. What you want to do is for it to stay on the same line, all right? Because if you had a baby who took a baby into your care at the age of maybe 3 months, you don't actually know. Like, this baby is packed with potential badness, like seriously. So what you want to do is to make sure that your baby, despite you providing a very healthy, nurturing environment, his brain is continuing to grow. In most cases, you will find that they might gain weight, but the head will be small. So this is an indication for you to say, my child is actually going to be delayed in a whole lot of areas. So I need to see my pediatrician, I need to see my child health nurse, I need to work with them, because you might just measure the things and the child health nurse might not necessarily pay attention. And the other thing is, most of you here, I know, are moms and your own moms, your own children. I've got my own children. By the time they get to 6 months, if they're lucky 12 months, that book is well and truly in the drawer. You only pull it out when they go to have immunizations. But this particular group of kids, you need to have that book open all the time. You need to monitor their growth until they're 5. Yeah, those charts in that book go on until the age of 5. Because what you want to see is that they have consistent, linear head growth and they're getting chubby, fat. Yeah? So it's really, really important, because when you then, if the child is then picked up at school at 4 or 5, which is often when they come to the pediatrician because the school then realizes that they have speech delay. What I want is to see how this child has been going at least over the last 48 months. I need to see a pattern of their growth and their development to be able to make an assessment and say, okay, it looks like we've had a period of growth arrest from this time to this time. I mean, you might see a child and think, your hair looks a bit funny, but we haven't actually measured it and we don't really know what funny means in the context of, proper numbers. All right, going back to the first case. We don't have mics, maybe we don't need them anymore. But going back to the first case, what do we think we should do, or where do we think this boy is going, or what happened, what went wrong? Yeah. Sorry? No, he's been in care since 3 years old. Yeah, he mixed sculpting. And then we probably failed to identify that. When he came into care at 3, he just got assimilated into a home, and this poor carer probably put through so much hell. And they tried their best, as they usually do, didn't get so much support from us, pediatricians or case managers, and this child missed early intervention. So that's the key there. Get a child at this age, you must insist that they have a formal growth and development assessment. All right? The guideline in Darwin is that by 3 months of child being in care, they must have a pediatric assessment. And in fact, I think we are not doing it as best as we should, because we know that these kids are going to have issues anyway. And Americans do it much better. They have standardized growth assessments. You come and see a pediatrician in our place, you just get I just look at you, I talk to you, I examine you, and that's not enough. Okay? So what these kids actually need is a formalized standardized assessment, such as a Bailey's or a Griffiths, looking at all the developmental domains across the board. So if you take nothing out of this talk today, please know that these kids are at risk. That is a fact. That they have missed some areas of sculpting in their brain, and that you can expect them to have problems. You will only know about behavioral problems because those are the ones that give you headaches. The other developmental problems, such as fine motor skills, inability to write, not really understanding what you're saying, may not be picked up until they go to school, and they struggle because the teachers just seems to be talking in another language. They can't process things quickly enough for them to understand. You bring them to see me at 8, I diagnose them with ADHD, which is wrong. But that's the easiest thing to do, because you give them learning, it settles them down. But that's not the point. The point is at 3, you need to demand that your pediatrician does a complete developmental assessment, which at very basic should be an ASQ. It's called an Ages and Stages questionnaire. It's available in most of our clinics, community clinics in Darwin. The nurses would usually do it at 4 months, 8 months, 12 months, and then at immunization times, the nurses would do it. I don't know what other places do, but that's the minimum screening tool that a child should have. And they should have this test done at least every 6 months, because it looks at development across the board. What happened to my slides?
It rolled back.
Did I? Oh. Sorry about that. Right, so that's our boy, and then this next one, the 2-year-old. What should we do? Where's the man? Oh my God, where is he? Oh, hello. Maybe I should use this one. What do we do with this little one? What?
Supportive placement.
Yeah? Can anyone identify with this case? Yeah? Do you guys feel the same? Do you sometimes feel like, oh my God, I'm just getting too close, I don't want to get too close?
Yeah, the fear of them being taken is that
Is that right?
It depends on what type of work the caseworker has done, about what is the plan, how well informed are you on how that sort of stuff's going, what your expectation was when the child was first placed. A lot of that sort of stuff can really help knowing, is this likely to be long term? Because you can then enter it at a different level than what you would if they were If
So
you know it's
what
gonna
would you say to your colleague who had this scenario?
Say to who?
What would you say to your colleague, your other foster carer who had this?
Well, I'm just looking at, she's 2 year old, she's 2 years of age, so she's got a lot of years of scholarship still to come. So
Yeah.
if this lady feels she's unsuitable in some way, if you've got someone who can provide an equally suitable environment on long-term care, then I think a transition might be okay.
That'd be okay. Yeah, it's a hard one, isn't it? Yeah, because she's also uncertain.
Thinking about the child.
Yes. Yes. The other way of thinking of it is, what if she takes 3 months to settle in where she's going? Might she regress? Might she?
3 months out of 3 years is minimal. But settling in here is to be expected. What is settling in? I mean, it may be that settling in maybe is just a minor thing.
Yeah. I don't know the answer. By the way. The
3
right
months
answer.
out of 3 months out of
So,
3 to 5 years.
I suppose I'm putting up these cases. Yes, please.
There's this policy that we don't allow interstate transition, but you can still talk to the department and see what we can come up with in relation to this situation.
Yes.
And they will give you more advice. Also, we have got attachment.
I feel very strongly about children not moving and supporting the carer with the placement if the department would be willing to relocate the child because she is only 2 years old and that family was still willing to, obviously she has got some attachment because she's worried about what is going to happen to the child. I would think that would be a much more positive outcome than having to move the child again, because I think the issue with children moving from placement to placement is a really big issue and contributes to a lot of damage in children in care.
I agree completely. It's not only just the child, it's the foster carers as well.
It's very damaging.
Yeah, and the whole family, it changes the whole structure of the family, so I agree.
At times the child will only be on a short-term order and the care plan may be reunification. So I'm a care assessment and support practitioner. So one of the things I try to say to carers is that given what we now know about child development, that whatever care they give them in the 3 months or 6 months that they have that child is going to have a significant impact on that development. And so while there is that uncertainty about what happens next, is the reunification going to occur? Is the family going to have made those changes? Will there be a longer term order sort down the track?
You see, in a lot of cases, the restoration will sort of fall
And
through and then
they take time, and so things don't work out as originally planned. We have one of the things I think is really important to emphasise for carers, that whatever they do within that period, whether it is just for a few weeks, a few months, a couple of years, in that early, particularly in that early first 5 years, is important and is going to have a really, really strong positive impact on that child.
Even if we do that though, when you change that child from placement to placement to placement, it sort of takes it away from that child. Each time you change that child's placement, you're taking away from what has been put into that child because that child is, reverting back to that.
I agree, it's not.
It should be much
I don't know
more
what the ideal
child-centred.
is, but sometimes we work with court orders and families do have to have the opportunity to have made those changes, and reunification is still looking like a possibility. So we've got to still reassure carers that what they do is important to that child.
I really feel for biological siblings as well, because the effect on them often isn't seen, and it affects them just as much as it does the foster child.
So this discussion is really lively because it's a difficult case. It's very difficult. We know the benefits of stable placement very much, but also we know the difficulties that individual carers themselves face, and we also know the benefits of reassurance for the child, because you don't want to then make the child feel like they're going to be plugged every time, every 6 months, because it also births an element of rejection they are too little to understand. All they know is that mommy doesn't want me anymore. Now I have a new mommy. Oh, now I have a new mommy. How many mummies am I going to have? So there's so many layers to it. Not to mention the guilt that the carers also feel for having to let this child go. So it's a complex scenario. Any thoughts about these two girls?
I feel like if the parent wants to slowly change the behaviours, and obviously, you know, some parents are not interested in doing that, but some parents actually just don't actually know how to parent because they haven't had that themselves.
Yes.
And it would be great if we had a provision where somebody actually can be in the home and to support that. Because those girls are 11 and 9, you're going to have a different set of issues when you remove them. To have the support in the home would be a better option.
And you know the funny thing is, the next time I saw these kids, I think it must have been 2 weeks later, they came in with a carer. So they had been removed from their home. And you could see the anger that the girls had towards the carer, and the resentment. And this lady had actually looked after them for a long time. They knew that she had been in that care for a long time. They were fine. Like they were taken at a young age, put with this lady, did a marvelous job. Then they had a short period with their mum. You know, they had that connection, that instant connection with their mum, and were with her for 12 months dealing with her because she just couldn't put it together, hold it together for them. I didn't actually know what to think about that case. I felt a bit sad. I thought, why don't you just hire a maid? I don't know. Just
I think it's deeper than that, isn't it?
A lot of people don't want to accept that help as well, so they were saying, you know, you can lead a horse to water.
Yeah.
Alright, so I suppose in summary, unstimulating emotionally and physically unsupportive environments, as we just mentioned, they're no good for a baby's brain development. And we see these mirrored as behavioral problems, cognitive difficulties, kids who play up at school, you know, kids who are just awkward and can't run and they can't play soccer. They trip on themselves a lot because their fine motor skills are just off balance. And we miss to pick that up when we had them in our care at 2 or at 3 or at 4. And then they have these problems, they can't keep up with their peers in their playground, and what do? They play up. They start kicking everyone else because why can't he kick the ball and I can't kick the ball? You know, they're in class and they can't write their name properly despite your best efforts at home, reading for them and getting them to do their alphabets, but they just can't do it. What do? They play up, they get distracted, they throw, you know, make paper planes and throw them across the room. You bring them to my clinic, I do an assessment for ADHD, they have ADHD, but that's not the story. The story is more than that. So,
is it ADHD diagnosed to give them a label for funding, or is it more?
Not ask a pediatrician that.
The child must be diagnosed.
Putting you on the spot.
You know, the funding is great, and if that's the way they get funding at school, then that's
The
great.
reality is that is true. Because, I mean, I get a child, they're 10. Yeah, they need help. And they display behaviors that are seen in children with ADHD, but may not necessarily have a primary ADHD. The primary problem they have is that their brains have failed to scout. But at 10 years old, what am I going to do?
Yep.
I just have to say they have something so they can get the funding and hopefully make them more adaptable and function in their current environment that's very challenging. And we find that even on medications, it doesn't work because that's not what the diagnosis is.
It's not what it is, yeah.
Because a lot of things like FASD cannot be diagnosed unless they've got those facial features. So the paediatricians look at the kids and go, well, we need to get you some form of help. And they go, right, well, something's better than nothing. So here's your label, and then you'll be able to access these services to be able to, you know, get you somewhere.
Right. I guess I have said that hopefully I have reassured you that think you guys that you're not recognized well enough. You know, what you actually do for the society is just massive. You know, if these kids didn't have that kind of supportive environment that you provide for them for almost no remuneration, a lot of our jails would be filled and hospitals will be filled with people, patients, offenders. It's such a sad reality that, you know, somebody can't say, just actually put a dollar amount appreciation to what you do. But anyway, I know that's not why you do it. You do it because you're just, I don't know, I don't have a word. Amazing. Or crazy. I just, you know, had a story with some parent who stays up awake all night, and then the other one, they take turns. Like, you know, how many years of your life are you taking out of, you know, rubbing away, taking them away? Anyway, so this study was very interesting, but I might just talk about it very quickly. It was a study it was an American-sponsored study that was done in Romania, where they had a high number of kids in orphanages. And what they wanted to demonstrate was that if you take out a child from a neglectful environment, and in this case it was that the fourth column on the other side of that table, where kids are in severe you know, place of neglect. In an orphanage, you might have, you know, if there are babies in the cots, the babies will just be there for the rest of their lives. They're given food, and then they just stay there. You might have one carer who looks after 50 babies. So they randomly selected some babies and placed them in foster care in normal homes, and then did MRI scans of the brain at a certain age. They followed them up until the age of 8 and others up until the age of 13. What they then did was that they did scans on the kids in the foster care, the kids that had been placed, the kids in the orphanage, the kids that had been placed in foster care, and normal subjects, children who were with their mothers and fathers in just normal environment. And interestingly, what they did find out is that the children who were removed from the orphanage and put in foster care, their brain scans were exactly the same as the children who had been just lived with their moms and dads. And the children left in the orphanage, obviously their brains there was no scouting. So what this says to us, that what you are actually doing makes a massive difference. If you can provide a stable, long-term, supportive environment for that child, you can essentially change their destiny forever. You can change their future forever. I was listening to that other gentleman, I'm sorry I forgot his name, but he was in foster care. Daryl. It's because of somebody opened their hearts and their home and allowed him for his brain to sort itself out in a normal way, that now he's who he is. Yeah? You can look back and think, oh, I'm not making that much difference really, except for stopping the child from going to hospital because of malnutrition. It's way more than that. You know, you are raising an army of hopefully socially responsible adults in the future, because you are changing the way their brain is going to be wired, and that's the best you can do for them. They may not have the best education, but they will have the know-how to navigate life. So be encouraged. Please know that, at least for pediatricians, we think that you're amazing. I talk to you about that. What's next? All right. Okay. So essentially, as I said, that study concluded that if children are removed from neglectful environments in early life and enter into a high-quality family environment, they can end up with essentially normal brains. Alright. Now this is I think I was just trying to demonstrate something in real life. This is my daughter, she's 9, and this is my son, he's 10, and that's my husband. I just took this picture randomly. I like taking pictures like all of us do. And I observed something, that this guy, he was looking at his dad and, you know, daughter and son thing, and he thought, oh, what what about me? Because, you know, we all like attention. We all like to feel like, you know, we are recognized and we can do something, except that obviously he was too tall to.
You gave it a red hot go, don't you?
Any questions? Comments? Questions? I think we're running late. Very late. Questions, comments?
Thank you very much.